Hey everybody, welcome to Midweek at the Compass. My name is Jake, I'm our online pastor here, and we are working through a sermon series called Who Do You Think You Are? I love being able to say that multiple times now, each and every week, because I just get to practice my best dad voice. But this week we learned about the fact that we are adopted. We studied this passage out of Isaiah 49:15, that one of our core identities is being a child of God. And that's something that we get to celebrate through the fact that we've been adopted as Jesus followers into this awesome family. So I'm excited to be able to have a conversation to you today just around themes of adoption. And I'm going to be joined by a friend and colleague here, Darcy Ruscitti. Darcy, first off, happy belated Mother's Day.
Thanks, Jake.
Appreciate you taking the time to do this. So just really briefly, what is it that you do here at the Compass Church?
Yeah, I do a couple things.
Just a few.
Yeah, I have the privilege of working with our worship arts team. I work every week as we plan months in advance and work on sermon series and what's going to be happening in our services across our campuses. I work with our communications teams and all of the materials that go out digitally, via print. And then I work on other projects as assigned, right? Things like a Rise Up campaign or membership or whatever might be coming up next. So get to have my hand in a few different things.
Yeah, so next to nothing, right?
Pretty much.
You're
next
bored
to
all the
nothing.
time.
I'm very bored. Yeah.
So honestly, thank you for doing this. The reason I'm excited to have you here is just a little bit of your story and how it ties into what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
And it's one that you and I have not really had a lengthy conversation around, so I'm going to be really excited to see where we end up going with this.
Yeah.
And that's the fact that you are adopted.
I am.
So I'm wondering, maybe you can just start us from the beginning of the story that you know here. Just what was that ultimately like? How did you come to be in the family that you were in?
Yeah. So I was adopted at age 2 weeks old. My parents were living out in Las Vegas. My dad was in the Air Force. He was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base. And so the joke was always, I was a slot machine baby. I don't know. I have no idea. But I was just a mere 2 weeks old. My mom was not able to have children. And so that was their desire. And they worked through that. And they ended up with me at 2 weeks old.
Fantastic. So out in Las Vegas, is that where you were born and raised then here?
Yeah, so I lived there until I was about 5 years old. I've gone back to my old house once. Kind of a funny story. I have an uncanny sense of direction. I'm pretty good about being able to find my way around. And my husband and I had gone out for a visit, and we went to find my old home. And when we were getting closer, I was like, it's going to be right around the corner. I mean, I hadn't been there since I was 5, but it was...
5-year-old, you still remember that?
I did. I don't know. There was just something, a sense of it that I knew where I was. But
That's amazing.
I don't have too many memories. I remember we went to Disneyland. Maybe that's where my whole Disney fanatic thing started, because being California was so close before we moved to Illinois. So yeah, we moved here when I was 5, but.
So I'm okay with directions. I like to say that my wife is Magellan. Like, she can read a map like none other.
Yeah.
I sometimes just wish she would program things in and click start, but she doesn't roll that way.
Okay.
She'll pull up the map and try and like snake her way through everywhere.
The
And I
old-fashioned
can't stand it.
Figure it out and has that sense of direction.
But's amazing at it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Tell me a little bit just of growing up as an adopted child.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it was any different than somebody who was just biologically born into a family? Do you have any stories or remembrances there?
Yeah, I can tell you that about 3rd grade, I think, is when it maybe clicked. I remember my parents bought me a book, and it was about being adopted. And I remember them giving it to me and reading it and kind of being like, oh, this was a good book. And then all of a sudden going, wait a second, this is about me. This is about how there was a family that gave me up, and this is the family that took me, and being in that family and how that process kind of happens. And so that's about when I remember that it clicked. Maybe a few years later, my parents gave me literally a typed out old-fashioned typewriter sheet of paper that's got things on it like not names by any means, but height, weight, hair color, occupation, nationality of my birth parents. And I do remember when they gave that to me that I was kind of like, so you've known this information for a while, and I just got it. And I do remember having to process through, seeing that information, because I didn't know any of that.
Huh.
So those are, a couple things that I kind of way back memories for me.
Okay. Do you feel like friends would have treated you any different? And I apologize for some of the ignorance maybe of these questions. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, do you have any remembrances of feeling like you didn't fit, or was that just not a thing for you?
No, not so much with a friend group, and all my friends knew it. I never didn't tell people. I'll tell you something that was kind of funny is I would have people tell me that I looked just like my dad, like my adoptive dad. And it was like, no, I don't. Like I always would want to call it out. Like, no, I don't. Like, why do you say that? And it was interesting because I have a younger brother and he's also adopted, and people would say he looked like my mom. And so it was just always like, you hear that, right? You look like your mom, you look like your dad. And people would say that to us too. And I'd always like, no, I don't. And so I can always remember having those moments of, you'd have these like kind of gut check reality moments of going, that's not me. No, you say these things that maybe apply to a bunch of other people, but that doesn't apply, to me. So I do remember that, but I don't remember anything with a friend group or anything along those lines.
So did you ever have this overwhelming feeling of wanting to get to know your birth parents? Or was that something that was just never, did you have any desire to do that? Is that just like a common misconception, or what was your experience there?
Yeah, I know that there's a varying degree of people that have that desire, that want to go. You hear those stories of reconnecting with a sibling that you never knew you had, right? I feel like those, maybe because of social media, those kinds of things are more and more popular these days, if you will. I actually personally have never had that desire. Kind of interesting. My mom, probably my teenage years. So back in the day, there used to be this thing called a newspaper.
I've heard of that. I actually delivered those as a kid.
Oh, did you really? I did not know that.
My first job. I was 6 years old, and I helped my brother deliver papers, and then I got my own paper route by the time I was 8.
Nice.
So I've been working for a long time.
Yes, you have been. Yeah. I didn't know that. So there was always this article. There was a column by this columnist called Dear Abby. She would always give like life advice. People would ask questions and she'd give advice. So about once a year, she would run an article about if you ever want to find your birth parents. My mom would religiously cut that out and give it to me. I can remember that in high school. Even going off into college, she would cut it out and mail it to me. And she'd always be like, I'm okay if you want to do this. If this is information that you feel like you need to know, I want you to know that you can go and do that. And even knowing I maybe even had her blessing to do it, her encouragement to do it, I did not have that desire in my heart. I know other people that have. I know other people that it's almost been this hole for them, that they felt like they needed to find that and get that filled, but I personally did not. So I think the only time it may have been, should I think about that? Is that something that, is this even something God wants me to do, of finding out who these people are, is when Rich and I went to have our own children.
Okay.
And, part of that process, you're, bajillion doctor's appointments, and actually any doctor's appointment really, but it's, and even to this day, I just literally had surgery a little bit ago, and they want to know your health history, right? So at any point, that first, when we were, pregnant and going to have Taylor, what's your health history? We want to know your medical background. Do you have any of this on, either side? And my answer is, I'm adopted. I don't know any of my medical history. There was none of that on that typed out piece of paper. So I think those are maybe the only times it's kind of tugged at my heart, maybe just a tiny bit, but even then it was like, okay, there are other ways we can do more tests, or there's other things we can do to figure things out that I didn't feel like I needed to know that. So I know people personally that have just had that deep desire, kind of that longing for those questions to be answered, maybe the why, or just more about their health history, even that they wanted answers to, that they have gone on that search for that.
So do you feel like personally that you didn't want to know just because you loved the family that you have?
Yeah.
Or was there something else maybe even behind it?
Yeah.
Have you ever wrestled through that kind of end of it?
Yeah, I think a couple of things maybe. First of all, I have to tell you a little bit of this little fantasy game that I used to play about about it. And again, I'll age myself just like the newspaper type of thing. But I used to pretend that Cheryl Ladd was my mom. So there was this TV show called Charlie's Angels that was very popular.
So this one, thank you for explaining, because I was going to have to actually ask who is Cheryl Ladd.
Okay, and it's not the new Charlie's Angels. It's the like TV series that was going on back in the late 70s. Okay. And so there was like these 3 super women kinds of things, kind of.
Yeah.
To try to describe it. And I used to pretend that my mom was Cheryl Ladd, and she was just too busy on Charlie's Angels to really get to be my mom. And so I kind of would live out this little fantasy sometimes. So maybe I didn't want to burst the bubble of the fantasy.
Cheryl Ladd could have been your biological mother.
You never know.
Yeah.
So, no, I think that, I don't know. I just didn't, have that full desire to figure that out. My mom would give me that encouragement. I actually thought, in my head, I thought maybe once I wouldn't disappoint them. I don't know. I felt like maybe that would hurt them. Now, my dad passed away when I was about 20. I was in college. My mom actually just passed away about 1.5 years ago. And I thought maybe when that happened, I might feel like, okay, now that I know I won't hurt them or disappoint them, and I don't know. I don't know. Those are my words, not their words.
Yeah.
But that desire still didn't come about for me. So I don't know. Maybe I'm an anomaly in how this all happens.
It's still fascinating for me to hear. Now, I want to turn things just scripturally a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like from a theological end, we would say that if you have accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior, that you've been adopted into God's family. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you, as an adopted woman, what's your experience been like being adopted into God's family? Does that give you kind of different insight that maybe I might not have, or a different felt experience that I might not have?
Yeah, I think I have to start actually by saying, first of all, a huge appreciation to my parents that raised me, and they raised me in a Christian home.
Yeah.
So I knew the Lord from a very young age. I can remember going to Vacation Bible School and being very active in church. In high school, I was leading Vacation Bible School at our church. So I grew up with the Lord in my life. So I think actually kudos to my parents for that. I do remember hearing this concept of like being an adopted daughter of Christ, and what does that mean? And I also remember thinking like, that's not a far off concept for me. Like I understand what that means. I already relate to that word adopted. So of course I'm adopted in him, because I already understand that. So in a funny way, it may have actually been an easier concept for me than something I had to wrestle with, because it's like, that's already part of who I am. So I get that. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Which is maybe not the answer you were expecting to hear, because I think sometimes we go, oh, how do you have to wrestle through this concept or wrestle through that concept? And it's like, sometimes the Lord's provided a path that's like, I get that concept because of what he's done and how he's been involved in my life. And I think that's a little bit of the case for that.
Yeah, I don't think it was the answer I was expecting, in all honesty, but it makes a ton of sense, right?
Yeah. And I'm not sure that it would be that way for everyone. I mean, because I know, adoption is actually a term that we put out, and we're kind of covering a broad brush over a lot of different circumstances as to why or what was going on, or and they're not all pleasant, and they're not all easy. And so that's my story of how that went. I fully recognize that might not be everybody's story of how that goes.
Yeah, and it's one of those where you've experienced over the course of your whole life that you have been given rights and authorities as being a child of your parents, because you have always just been part of that family. And that's something where I wouldn't have thought about. That might actually be, in some regards for you and how you've been saying it, just an easier concept to wrestle through than maybe I would have imagined. Yeah.
No, and I don't want to paint this like it was an all easy thing for me my whole life either. There were moments I was not nice to my parents, and sometimes I would even use it against them of, you adopted me to do more housework and chores, and because I had my list of chores, and every Saturday before I could listen to Cubs games or watch them on TV, there was a list of stuff I had to get done. And so, when I resented that, I would be the kid that would throw the adoption thing back in the face a little bit, So I don't want to paint this picture that I was all good about all of it.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, if it makes you feel better, I wasn't adopted, but I was a middle child, so I was a jerk too.
Yeah.
well, I say was, maybe that's not totally past
Okay.
tense all the time, but I do my best.
Yeah.
So anyways, all that besides the point, this is not about me.
Yeah.
What are some truths that you've kind of learned and gleaned over the course of your life about the concept of adoption?
Yeah. I think really being that daughter of Christ and a royalty of the King, the ultimate King, right? And I think even though I say it was a natural part of understanding it or easier to understand, there have been moments in my life where I've needed to be reminded of that. I think we all go through those ups and downs and the valleys and the journeys of the seasons of life that takes us through. And so I had a season, a few years ago where I actually got reminded several times within about a 4-month time frame. I have this plaque that's in my bathroom, and it just says, "I'm a daughter of the King. That makes me royalty. Nothing on the outside, but Christ on the inside. He is my identity." And I love those words, and those words are special to me. They're special from an adoption of Christ, an adoption of many layers. They're very special to me. But God knows when we need to hear those words more often than others sometimes.
Yeah.
And within that 4-month time frame, I got this same quote, the same saying that's based out of Scripture in 3 different ways in my life. I got it on this plaque, I was given a necklace with it on it, and I was given a card with it on it. And it's just like, God just knew at that time, I just needed those constant reminders that who I am in Him. And so I think that, He's going to give those to us. He's going to provide those moments when we're listening, and He needs to be speaking to us, reminding us of that truth, and just really grounding us in that. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and what I love about it is just like the identity as Christ in me is kind of what that more or less ends with, and just how that's the constant reminder through this sermon series at a minimum, right? Like we have all of these things that are identity, but it all starts with the framework of it's Christ in me, and because of that, we have the identity of priests and adopted and all of those things, ambassadors, all those things that we've been able to kind of walk through here.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because we live in a world, we live in a society that wants to bombard us with all of these other things about asking who we are or questioning it. And your questions about adoption are great, but it's that inquiry, right? Like what makes you who you are? What makes you how you think, how you function? And so those things are all important. When you know Christ, that becomes the grounding of how you look in the lens that you look through all of those things. And it doesn't mean you're not going to question. It doesn't mean you're not going to ask. It doesn't mean you don't need to go on a journey to figure some of those things out. But it does ground us, which I think is super important.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, just outside of the wonderfulness of that quote, has there been scripture over the course of your life related to adoption, or maybe even loosely related, that you've been able to cling to with hope, truth, to ground yourself in?
Yeah. Do you mind if I read a few verses?
I would love it.
So Psalm 139 has always just had this special touch on my life. Over the years, I've heard a few sermons in my line of work, right? But just in my life. And this one, for some reason, it always feels new to me. It always feels refreshing to me. It always feels like you needed to hear this to me. And so this is one, this section of Psalms is one I always come back to. So I'll just read a few verses. "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before. You lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go to the heavens, there you are. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light will become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. Those words just speak to me about identity, about Christ in us, through the hard times, through the good times, and that just provides me so much comfort that this comes back to me all the time. So if I struggle with, do I not know my medical history? Do I struggle with, all the different aspects of, losing my mom, of, going through different things? Those are the particular words that really make a difference to me.
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now I'm wondering if we can make a super abrupt shift for just the last couple of minutes.
Absolutely.
So one of your roles here is, by and large, kind of helping pull together our weekend services week in and week out. And we just came off of, a few weeks ago here, our Easter services.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if you and me can just have, for a couple of minutes, some fun with numbers.
Okay. All right.
And
let's go.
Let's see where we get with this.
All right.
So I'm going to toss out a number. You tell us what it means.
Oh, man. I feel like this is a quiz here.
Well, if you're wrong, then maybe I'll try and correct you.
So you just made this a competition is what you did.
100%.
Absolutely. Okay.
All right. So the number, let's start with this one. 5,500.
Yeah, 5,500. 5,500 bags of popcorn that we put stickers on and gave out in order to help people feel warmly welcome to the next series. Who do you think you are?
Awesome. Okay, so let's scale it up a little bit. 6,600.
6,600 was the number of in-person attendance that we had across our 4 campuses. That number included kids, so in the worship center and in all of our kids' services.
Awesome. Okay, so 2,200.
2,200 would be your number.
That is my number. That's online service views.
Yeah.
And counting,
amazing.
which is the best part of all
that. And that's the
that.
views that we don't know the number behind that, like how many people were in a room watching together. That's always a little bit of a mystery to us. That's why we love connection cards, right?
Totally. We get to see on there, like, it's a family of 10 joining, or a husband and wife, or sometimes it's somebody saying, I watched this 3 or 4 different times because it just resonated.
Right.
We praise God for all of those.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
So let's keep going here.
Okay.
115.
Oh, I know that one too. Spanish service. We have a Spanish service that occurs at our Bolingbrook campus. This is the first time they were in the worship center for Easter, and that was also their new record high of how many people attended a service in Spanish. So that was super exciting.
That's awesome. So I want to keep going on and on. I could ask, say, like the number 4 or whatever, but I don't even know what that one would mean.
Okay,
I was thinking 4 campus pastors, but I also preached Good Friday, so
that
we could have gotten
5.
into a lot of it.
Yeah, right.
But I think what I want to end on is the number 17, because all of those numbers are fun, and we can kind of joke around and give all of you a little bit of a heads up of what happened on our Easter services, and that's not really even getting into Good Friday, which was also an amazing experience in person and online. Again, you should check that out at a minimum online. Go to our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
But that number that I want to toss out is 20.
Yeah.
What can we know about the number 20?
Yeah. So we created a new website page that's called thecompass.net/Jesus. And we actually created a QR code for it as well. And what we asked in the services, whether you were online or whether you were in person, if you were making a decision to accept Christ, to let us know. And that's because we want to celebrate with people. We want to come alongside and support in that journey, give you any tools or resources. And 20 was a number of people that filled out that connection and let us know about their journey. Now, my guess is there are probably other people out there that maybe weren't ready to tell us.
Yeah.
And so that page exists all the time. You could tell us after any series or after, any point into the day that you've made that decision, because we really do want to come alongside you as a church family and walk with you. And, it's fun to throw out the big numbers and, sometimes we can think, bigger's better and all that kinds of stuff. I don't know. I don't get caught up in some of that. It's fun. It's fun, but it's really, to me, it's about, people's lives being touched. It's about future generations being changed. For some reason, I feel like I heard more stories this year than I have in the past about the burden on families' hearts to get to church this year for Easter. And so there's, it's mom and dad and the kids, and so there's this generational impact. And I just really think that's super important right now. And so it's not just about one person being impacted. It's about looking ahead and going, okay, they just really made a difference for their whole line, their whole generation. And that to me is like, that's what we're about. That's what we're trying to make a difference.
Oh yeah. I said it on a weekend service a handful of weeks ago, but if the angels in heaven celebrate when one sinner repents and comes home, the fact that we had 20 here at our church is amazing. But then you scale it back, like we're just a really small church in the scheme of all of these God-honoring churches.
Yeah.
Like how epic of a party would it have been in heaven on Easter Sunday, just of people finding Christ, whether for the first time or through a rededication or whatever that looks like. And then just exactly to what you said, the legacy that leaves.
Right.
That it's not one person's decision. It's a decision that person ultimately is led to make that impacts and changes generations of families and friends.
Absolutely.
So it's a ripple effect that goes well beyond just that one choice. And I think you can hear it in our tone as, we had fun with the numbers, but when we get to that one, that's where that's where we get excited.
That is where you're starting to make a difference like that, and that God can use us in that way blows my mind. Blows my mind. So that's exciting.
Well, Darcy, honestly, thank you for taking the time to do this.
Of course.
For the work that you put in week in and week out, for putting everything together from our arts side of things and communications side of things, and from the online side of things. I don't want to neglect that at all. But honestly, just as much as that, I just want to say thank you for being a good friend to me here. I really enjoy just getting to sit down and chat with you.
Yeah.
You make me better because you're just fun and smart and intelligent, and you can read a room, and all of those things are just unbelievably important.
Very kind.
But it's true. So I want to let you know, thank you,
Jake,
being here and being a part of all this.
I enjoy having you as a part of our team and working together, and you are a special friend and colleague, and it's great to do ministry alongside of you. So thank you.
No, you're just saying that because you're on a podcast.
Well, no.
Maybe. Well, I think that's where we're going to have to leave it. So.
Okay.
But everybody, honestly, just thank you for taking the time to join in today. We love getting to have these faith conversations that stem from our weekend services, but then move beyond. And our hope is that these stories would resonate with you to the point where it just doesn't make you think that this was a great story to hear, but it's going to want to make you ask additional questions or go further in your own faith journey about, well, they tossed out these terms like we are adopted into God's family. I've never looked into that before. If you haven't, start that process. And if you don't know where to start with us. We would love to be able to do that. It could be as simple as just going and sending an email at online@thecompass.net and saying, I heard a podcast and I have no idea what to do next. Great. Let's have that as the beginning of a conversation. So with all of that said, I want to let you know a little bit of what's coming up next week. So we have these faith priorities at our church, and a couple of them get tied into what we're going to be talking about with our weekend messages. Our 4 priorities are pursue, connect, serve, and reach. And we're going to hear a decent amount about things like serving in a team and what that looks like. But I'm really excited to focus our midweek conversation on pursue him daily. Specifically, what does it look like to be able to read and study your Bible? I'm going to be joined by a friend from England. Seriously, his name is Peter Williams. He works at Tyndale House at Cambridge University. And when I tell you he's a smart guy, I think I'm underselling it. But the amazing thing is going to be things like what you're going to hear about how much of a genius that Jesus is. You curious? Come back next week and find out more here on Midweek at the Compass.